The respiratory center is located in the medulla oblongata and pons, in the brain stem. The respiratory center is made up of 3 major respiratory groups of neurons, 2 in the medulla and 1 in the pons. In the medulla they are the dorsal respiratory group, and the ventral respiratory group. In the pons, the Pontine respiratory group includes 2 areas known as the pneumotaxic center and the apneustic center. The respiratory center is responsible for generating and maintaining the rhythm of respiration, and also of adjusting this in homeostatic response to physiological changes. The respiratory center receives input from chemoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, the cerebral cortex, and the hypothalamus in order to regulate the rate and depth of breathing. Input is stimulated by altered levels of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and pH, by hormonal changes relating to stress and anxiety from the hypothalamus, and also by signals from the cerebral cortex to give a conscious control of respiration. Injury to respiratory groups can cause various breathing disorders that may require mechanical ventilation, and is usually associated with a poor prognosis. Respiratory groups. The respiratory center is divided into 3 major groups, 2 in the medulla and 1 in the pons. The 2 groups in the medulla are the dorsal respiratory group and the ventral respiratory group. In the pons, the Pontine respiratory group is made up of 2 areas, the pneumotaxic center and the apneustic center. The dorsal and ventral medullary groups control the basic rhythm of respiration. Dorsal respiratory group. In the medulla, the dorsal respiratory group makes up the inhalation area of respiratory control. Location: dorsal portion of medulla. Nucleus: solitary nucleus. Ventral respiratory group. In the medulla, the ventral respiratory group make up the exhalation area of respiratory control. Location: anterolateral part of medulla, about 5 mm anterior and lateral to dorsal respiratory group. Nucleus: nucleus ambiguous and nucleus retroambiguous. Function: it generally causes expiration but can cause either expiration or inspiration depending upon which neuron in the group is stimulated. It sends inhibitory impulse to the apneustic center. Pontine respiratory group. In the pons, the Pontine respiratory group includes the pneumotaxic and apneustic centers. These have connections between them and from both to the solitary nucleus. Pneumotaxic center. Location: upper part of pons. Nuclei: subparabrachial nucleus and the medial parabrachial nucleus of the parabrachial area. Function: it controls both rate and pattern of breathing. Limit inspiration. Apneustic center. Location: pons, lower part. Functions: it discharges stimulatory impulse to the inspiratory center causing inspiration. It receives inhibitory impulse from pneumotaxic center and from stretch receptor of lung. It discharges inhibitory impulse to expiratory center. Respiratory rhythm. Breathing is the repetitive process of bringing air into the lungs and taking waste products out. The oxygen brought in from the air is a constant, ongoing need of an organism to maintain life. This need is still there during sleep, so that the functioning of this process has to be automatic and be part of the autonomic nervous system. The in-breath is followed by the out-breath, giving the respiratory cycle of inhalation and exhalation. The number of cycles per minute is the respiratory rate. The respiratory rate is set in the respiratory center by the dorsal respiratory group, in the medulla, and these neurons are mostly concentrated in the solitary nucleus that extends the length of the medulla. The basic rhythm of respiration is that of quiet, restful breathing known as eupnea. Quiet breathing only requires the activity of the dorsal group, which activates the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles. Exhalation is passive and relies on the elastic recoil of the lungs. When the metabolic need for oxygen increases, inspiration becomes more forceful and the neurons in the ventral group are activated to bring about forceful exhalation. Clinical significance. Depression of the respiratory center can be caused by brain trauma, brain damage, a brain tumor, or ischemia. A depression can also be caused by drugs including opioids and sedatives. The respiratory center can be stimulated by amphetamine to produce faster and deeper breaths. Normally at therapeutic doses, this effect is not noticeable, but may be evident when respiration is already compromised.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.